You're smart, you're motivated, you want to do something big. You're on the verge of being a young boss, and we're going to help you get there. I'm your host, Isabel Garino, and welcome to the Young Boss Podcast, where youth is your power. Today's guest is a multifaceted entrepreneur, recently sealing the deal on his third home before 30 as a budding real estate investor. His full-time career is being a certified financial planner, guiding families towards a prosperous future with expert advice. Known for his infectious optimism and genuine care for others, he is the positive push we all need. A thought leader, fitness enthusiast, and master motivator, he's living proof that with the right mindset and relentless determination, we can all accomplish our goals and live our dreams. I'm excited to welcome Zack Hamm to the Young Boss Podcast. Zack, welcome.
Thank you. That was incredible.
It's a good intro.
That was fantastic.
I liked it. Okay, tell me a little bit about your view. I've heard that you view your life in containers. What does that mean?
A mentor of mine had once said, as I clearly got to a place in my life where I was juggling a bunch of plates.
Yeah.
I like to use analogies. I think the mentors that I have around me really put things into perspective by the analogies that they use. And one of my mentors had originally said that, life's about how many plates that you're spinning. And these different plates, they start to decrease in speed, and you really recognize when that happens, which plate is most important, because you have to take your attention off of one plate to respin the other one.
Yeah.
I've kind of come up and reestablished my own kind of analogy for that. But for me, it's really more or less like being on a freeway is what my life is. And each lane represents what's important to me in life. And I think it's really good to hone in on what lane you have on your freeway and at what point in time you're planning on transitioning to a different lane.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when running a business, they try to use the words balance. And I just don't believe in it. I think that if you want to be great at anything and set yourself apart, you have to go all in, and that has to be everything to you in that moment in your life.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my analogy, I guess. Breaking it down into containers is my different lanes in life and what I choose to make important to me, which for me, like you nailed on those things, is fitness, is my family, is health, my businesses. That's it. It's very simple, but yet very complex as you dive deeper in.
Yeah. I had a mentor who recently was like, what do you do at a level 10? And then everyone in the room was kind of like, they were all entrepreneurs, and they were like, if I do something at a level 10, it makes everything fall lower. But that's exactly what you're talking about, is like sometimes certain parts of your life or your business are going to require you to be there at a 10. And other things may have to back off a little bit. And then it doesn't mean that they're forever backed off.
100%. Right?
You can adjust in certain times. Okay, family's going to be number one right now, and I have to give it that energy, but it can't be 100% at all times in that.
It can. I mean, we all have the same 24 hours in the day.
Yeah.
And again, I think if you're going to be great at anything, you have to be obsessed with that one thing. And I think it is important, at least for me, it's important to have obsessions in different categories or different lanes.
Yeah.
Because I can become bored, I guess, very easily.
Yes.
And so it's very important for me to kind of re-energize myself, not by taking breaks, at least for me, it's by shifting gears or lanes and getting back into a place where I'm like, hey, I haven't given this as much attention as I'd like to. I see that it's clearly suffering.
Yeah.
Is this other lane that I've been in while I've had the pedal to the metal okay for me to kind of turn on that signal and shift to a different area and get that up to speed of where I want it to be? And that's just kind of, I guess, the way in which I live my life.
I think it's absolutely valid, and it's one of those things that you really you have to be able to adjust. I say that too. I literally said on a previous episode, I was like, I feel like I get physically sick when I take too long of a break.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't like breaks.
No.
I'd rather just shift my energy on something else and go crazy into that. And some people are like, oh my gosh, but I need all this break. I need all this time off. And it's just like, do you?
Yeah. I think for me, those individuals, they need to gain more clarity on what's important to them in life and find out that it's not the time away from something doing nothing. It's the time away from something, focusing your attention on something else that brings you that joy. And that's where I get the kind of refreshment or re-energize from different areas of my life, is just by refocusing my attention on where I want to be at that time.
Yeah. I know having a strong why is important to you. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I mean, I think that's everything. I think if you can gain clarity on why exactly you're doing something in life and what you're doing it for, just like financials, I think the biggest thing that I always try to outline with my clients is them really understanding, one, what's important to them about money, them gaining clarity of what is their attachment to money, physically, emotionally, how do they think about it? And a lot of that has to do with, their childhood or the experiences that they've had in their past and how they've developed that relationship with money. And
You're
that
like
allows
a CFP therapist.
You could say that. You could say that. Again, I think more people misunderstand that money and making decisions about the money is so closely related to emotion and less closely related to logic. And if you can start to remove some of that emotion and think more logically, I think you can have longer term success, but that's extremely challenging to do.
Yeah. As a CFP, is there a particular group of people that you like to work with, you like to focus on?
Yeah, I would say my niche is probably younger professionals, specifically business owners. Again, we've kind of built the way that we run and operate. And I said we, as in my 4 partners and I, as our client's kind of financial CEO. So I think it's really nice because it really flows well into how I run my life and kind of incorporating that into how I help, I think, my clients maintain and operate their own personal finances as well to maximize how they're going to achieve their goals and when they're going to achieve them.
What's the biggest misconception people come in with about money and how to plan and how to asset protect and do all that stuff?
I'd say the biggest misconception that I see is people focus so much on the investment choices, which are important.
Yeah.
They give less focus on what they can control.
Okay.
So they try and control and really manipulate these things that are out of their control.
Yeah.
And that's a big portion of life too, is brushing off the things that you'll never be able to get a grasp on and that are going to be volatile and change in different directions. And the reality is, the better that you can prepare yourself emotionally and physically to just kind of go with the flow and not try to control the things that are out of control, I think the more success that you have. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception, is making sure that our clients have a plan of action that allows them to really maximize the things that are in their control in their small community in life, and give less attention emotionally and physically to the things that are out of their control.
That's really valid. And I think that there's so many things that are out of our control in life, and people love to focus on that, right? They're just like, let me think about all of this stuff instead of focusing on the couple of things that, if you just nail down, you can actually, make sense of it. It can work.
Yeah, I think it's a defense mechanism for most people to focus on the things that are out of their control, because then that deflects that attention away from them. So they can just say, oh, well, I'm looking at these things. And it's like, okay, well, what are you doing to change those things? And it's more difficult to create that change internally within yourself and your small family community than it is to point the finger at someone else at a bigger picture and say that, oh, well, they need to change, or we need to change this.
Right. This is why this happened, or whatever. So if you're listening and you're a young boss and you don't have, a financial planner helping you out, definitely check out Zack and his company, because they could be exactly what you need.
I appreciate it.
I know that you like to-do lists. Why do you like to-do lists? How do they help you stay organized?
Yeah, I love to-do lists. It comes down to the clarity. It comes down to the why.
Yeah.
Again, my goal every single day is to improve on myself, on my business, on my family, on my friendships. Again, different lanes and different areas of life. But for me, having a to-do list is the clarity that I need to know what steps I needed to be taking to mark certain things off my list. And I found that every single day I have a to-do list.
Okay.
I don't think it needs to be complex.
No.
I simply just use the to-do list on my Apple phone, and every single time I come across something, I add it to my to-do list. It could be something that's small. It could be, hey, I heard someone use a word the other day and I don't know what that word means. It could be extending my vocabulary and making it a priority to look up that word and map out how I may be able to use that in further conversations and sentences.
Yeah.
So it could be something as simple as that goes on my to-do list, to something that's much larger that could go on my to-do list as well. And every single day as I look that over, I pretty much go through and I start tackling that to-do list, whether it's a small item or large item. And that's how I believe I've been able to really kind of 10x or increase my ability to achieve certain goals of mine in a shorter period of time.
I equally am obsessed with to-do lists.
I love it.
And I have all my dailies, right? Like
Yes.
this is what we're doing today. And I'll accomplish everything, right? There may be like one or two that will roll over, but very rarely. For the most part, it's like, no, I'm mapping out what I'm doing today. If I can do more than that, great.
Awesome.
But I want to accomplish all of this. But then there's the list that's like, your growing list,
Yes.
right? Do you do dailies and a growing, or you just have a growing?
You know, I'm obsessive. So like anything I put on my list, it's more than likely getting done. I'm human, so I have a couple things that if they stay on that list for a certain period of time, I go in and I reevaluate and ask myself, is this actually important?
Right, like why am I pushing it off?
Yeah, why am I pushing it off? Is it something that I don't really want to do? Does it not bring me joy? Do I not think it's going to push me closer to where I want to be? Or is it just not a priority to me in my life at this point? So I kind of usually ask myself those three things. And then if the answer to each of them is no, I take it off the list. And then if it brings its way back onto the list in the future, then again, I try and take care of it at that time. But I don't get super granular on daily, weekly, monthly. I think it's great for people to do that. I think different people need to operate on different standards and calendars and list. But again, because I feel like I hold myself to a certain standard already, it's pretty unlikely for that thing not to be completed. When it goes on my list.
That's good. I know that you're super into fitness. So what benefit do you feel that physical health and exercise has to being a CEO and running your own business? Because there's a lot of people who I feel like start running their business. They maybe were into health and fitness and now they let it completely slip because all their energy is going there. So what do you think about how to incorporate those and how do they benefit one another?
I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, that's something that I've observed a lot of. You know, when you look at people with mass amounts of wealth, I always try to look over them physically, mentally, emotionally. Again, because when you're obsessed with something and giving everything you have, it's very easy for other things in your life to kind of dissipate and not become as relevant as you would like them to.
Right.
And health, I think, is one of the easiest things.
Yes.
And so I've always kind of made it a priority for me. I said, as soon as I stopped playing, college football, I said, hey, I'm not going to lay off the gas and the intensity on how I continue to progress whatever physical outlet that I'm utilizing at that point in my life. I think it was a difficult kind of mindset shift for me going from being a college athlete and saying, well, I know why I'm training, right? I'm training for
a purpose, for
being on the field, for making, stats and having fun doing this thing. And to go away from that to saying, well, like, why are you doing it? I've had coaches look at the training that I'm doing now and they say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And for me, that was a big mindset shift. It was like, well, I'm doing it because, again, it's one of those things that makes me better than who I was yesterday physically. But more importantly, I've realized that I don't need to be chasing anything physical to have a reason why I want to push myself in the gym. Because I know the mental benefits for me completely outweigh the physical ones. I mean, the clarity that I get, the energy that I get, the sense of accomplish. Again, it's kind of one of those items, although it's not on my to-do list, it doesn't need to be because it happens every day. And that's just why it's so important to me. I mean, I think again, it brings clarity, it brings a certain level of energy, and it's one of those things that starts off my day bringing me a lot of joy and happiness.
I think for sure when you can make that switch to I'm doing this with a goal or a purpose to I'm just doing this because it's good for me. It feels good. I like the way, I feel when I'm doing it and I feel after is when you finally actually start to enjoy yourself in the gym.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things I think you bring up a good point. Like I tell people, just get started, and it doesn't have to be in the weight room. It could be running. It could be rowing. Figure out what is most fun for you that you can stay consistent with. I had a buddy the other day, this is kind of off topic, but I had a buddy the other day, it's kind of embarrassing. I sent him like a gym pic jokingly, and he was like, dang, bro, are you going to like prepare for a show? And my response is, because I truly believe it, I'm like, no, I'm just preparing for life. Like this is the best version of me and who I am, because what I found that helps me combat the pressures that I feel when running my business or growing my family is that if I can go in, and this is kind of an odd way of thinking, but it's my way of thinking. If I can go into the gym and create more pressure, more pain, create more resilience in there when I'm inflicting that on myself, that helps me alleviate what other people or outside sources can do to me when it's out of my control.
Yes, being a boss can be very uncomfortable. And you cannot control the situations you're going to be in. So if you can get yourself used to being uncomfortable, being
Yes.
in a position that you're just like, what am I doing
Right,
here?
right.
And you learn how you react in that situation. Now you know, okay, when I'm in the boardroom, I know how I react in these
Exactly.
situations.
And it becomes something that you're used to. It
Yeah.
no longer becomes something that you're uncomfortable with. When you've done something that is uncomfortable so many times, it becomes comfortable.
Right.
And that's the beauty of it. And I think for me, that's the beauty of the gym, is going in there, like you said, and doing something that's uncomfortable until it becomes comfortable.
Did you grow up with entrepreneurial parents? Because you are like doing 1,000,001 things. So how did you get this influence in your life?
My dad is a business owner.
Okay.
I'm not sure I would say he's entrepreneurial.
Okay.
He's extremely hardworking. I've got a lot of characteristic traits, I think, that were passed on to me from my parents as I observed them working extremely hard. But to say that he is maybe a little bit more of a risk taker, he's usually more risk adverse.
Okay.
He likes to really stay in his lane and focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was a lot of conversations with him that he disagreed with when I started, the concrete coating business.
Okay, so tell me about that, because we've yet to have someone whose parents really didn't support them, or at least gave them a lot of pushback.
Yeah, I think they do a good job at supporting, but my parents have always been extremely blunt and transparent, which I like that about them. They don't sugarcoat anything. And I think his biggest fear was, as maybe he didn't know me as well as he may have thought, or how he knows me today, is that he was concerned that one business will lack while the other one starts to succeed, or vice versa, which I agree with him. It's very easy for that to happen. And I think the initial conversation was, hey, Zach, I really would like to see you focus on this one thing, as I feel this other thing could become a distraction. What's the quote? It's like, person of many trades is skillful at none, or something. I'm butchering that, of course. But most people, if they look at that full quote, and again, it doesn't help that I don't know it, but if they look at the full quote, it actually extends past to say, a person of many trades is actually more skillful than a person who only has one skill at one trade. But yeah, it was kind of those tough conversations. And again, a big part of that had definitely made me second guess myself through that period. And it's probably what has also allowed me to create more systems and processes than what's probably necessary. But that's what keeps me in line. It's what keeps me organized and allows me to be able to hyper focus on all these different things, because I know what I want. I have the clarity, and I have the clarity because I have the organizational structure.
Hey, it's Isabel. Thanks for listening to the Young Boss podcast. I recently wrote a book called Young Boss, and it's filled with top tips I've learned over the years on how to survive and thrive in business. Pre-order your copy now by heading to the link in the podcast description. Now, back to the show. Are you saying that because maybe he didn't support you 100%, or at least had a lot of questions, that you felt you almost had to go above and beyond in proving him wrong?
Oh, for sure.
So the systems and setting everything up was to make sure that you don't fail, like make sure that this is going to be legit.
Yeah, I mean, I think in most situations, what I've found when you look at people who have found success in their lives, typically at the beginning of that pursuit, it's either driven by fear or ego. And hopefully I like to see people find a transition point where they reach a certain level of success where they move from that fear or ego and they move more into a place of peace and fulfillment. And I think it's at that point in success that you really start to do things out of enjoyment and love, and less out of spite for what other people said you could or could not do. But yeah, there was probably plenty of that in there at the beginning of the pursuit of that business.
Yeah. It's very cool because it's so interesting that people who do choose to become their own, boss and a CEO and run their own thing, everyone has such a different background and story. Some people, they saw their parents do it. It makes a lot of sense. It's what I've always known. Other people, it's like, oh my God, no one in my family's ever done this.
Right.
And so it really ranges the gambit. And to me, it's like, what's going on with you?
Yes.
Like, it doesn't really matter what your background is, but it can be scarier or somewhat perceived as easier with the different backgrounds.
Perception, yeah.
But it's all about who you are.
Yes.
And sometimes it's like you could have a family full of teachers and you're just like, I'm not that, right? So I think it's important to just know yourself and know who are you called to be. Like, sometimes you're just sitting in an office and you're like, this is not for me. I cannot take direction any longer.
I agree.
And
I think to me, that's the biggest benefit of, and I don't even want to say entrepreneurship, although it was that for me. It's this exploratory stage where you go out and it's this journey that you have to fall in love with, because that's all we have at the end of the day are these experiences and this perception of what took place at that point in time in our life. And that's a beautiful thing that you can create and that you do have control over, that I'd like to see more and more people explore and pursue and become comfortable with making a part of their life.
Yeah. Thinking about, that and starting your business and trying to maybe start with that ego of let me prove somebody wrong, right? Is it okay to quit? Is it okay to just pull back and say like, actually, never mind, I don't want to do this anymore?
I think absolutely. I think there has to be a certain level of commitment at first. I think quitting kind of gets a bad rap. I like to say, I guess, retire. But I think in order to reach that stage of retirement, again, you shouldn't continue to pursue something that's not making you happy, that you don't feel like you're progressing in, that really isn't filling up your cup. Is it helping you achieve all those things of why you originally started out to achieve it? And if that answer changes, and it could start out that way and change over time, and that's why it's important to be so in tune with yourself that you continue to question yourself and what you're doing, because that's the only way to learn and grow, and you learn and grow throughout the process, and what you loved at the beginning could change into something different at the end. But I think you have to give it a certain time period. You have to go through those stages of being uncomfortable and having that pressure on yourself so that it eventually does become comfortable. And at that point in time, once you do feel comfortable with some of those minor things that maybe at the beginning gave you anxiety or added additional stress or fear, and you're like, yeah, I can do that, in my sleep now, but I still just don't like to do it. Then I think at that point in time, it's time to say, okay, retire that skill or the pursuit of that thing and redirect your attention to something else that does bring you excitement in life.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are very fearful of failing in business when they start their own, but they don't necessarily give any thought to, what if I don't want to do this anymore?
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you're running and gunning and giving it your all, you start to feel like, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. And I like what you said, because to me, that wasn't necessarily, you weren't saying, I heard not to quit the whole thing necessarily. Sometimes it's a role. Sometimes it's saying like, I no longer find joy in doing this part of it.
Yeah.
To me, that's delegate and elevate. Let me hire somebody
that.
else to do this so I can move on to another sector. And then if I still hate the business overall, that's another conversation.
Absolutely.
But sometimes things can be filled with other people.
100%. I mean, that's a prime example. Like, I just brought on a partner to help me run the epoxy floor coating company.
Yeah.
Because I was going through some of that turbulence in my own life and really second guessing, is this something I still want to do?
Yeah.
And the answer was yes. I just needed to find the right person to delegate some of those tasks that would allow me to continue to focus on the things that brought me joy.
Right.
And I'm not going to say that you have to eliminate everything until you reach only the things that bring you joy. That's just not reality.
Right.
You're going to have to face hardship and times of turbulence and weather that storm.
Yeah.
That's part of being a business owner. That's part of life.
Yes.
And what I've learned too is it's not about controlling or trying to predict when that next thing is going to happen. It's about preparing yourself and how you're going to handle yourself through those circumstances when it does happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, it's really about asking yourself those questions and seeing if you can implement a key player into your life or into your world, in your business and your relationship that can help bring a little bit more peace and create a little bit more joy.
100%. I know one of your pet peeves is when people say, I don't have time. Tell me a little bit about that.
I mean, the reality is we all have the same 24 hours in the day.
I always say Beyonce has 24 hours too.
Exactly. I love that. Go Beyonce. I think it comes down to, again, perception. You look at these extremely well-off individuals who run multi-billion-dollar companies and you think, where do they find the time? But like, it goes back to our previous conversation. It's through delegation. It's through gaining clarity on where do they provide the most value to their businesses, to their relationships.
Yep.
And that's what they hone in on as their strengths.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying at the beginning of your pursuit in entrepreneurship or life that you should just immediately start to delegate, because you don't really understand your strengths until you've really realized what your weaknesses are.
That right there.
Right? But I guess back to your question, what I just can't stand about it is that it's an excuse.
Yeah.
And I tell people, and I even correct people, I say, you don't want to make it a priority.
Yeah.
It's not a priority. And that's fine. Again, I have my lanes in life. family, fitness, health, and my businesses.
Yeah.
There's not much that I do. Most people would probably look at my life and say, wow, you live a pretty boring life. I don't drink. I don't go out. I really limit the amount of time that I give to anything outside of those 4 categories. And that's because those are the things that bring me most joy.
Yeah.
And again, if there's something outside of that in my mind pops up and says, oh, you don't have the time for that, I change my thought process and say, I don't want to make that a priority. And I think that's a simple way that everyone can start taking the first step in identifying what they want in life and what they don't want in life, and deciding like, I have control over that, and I'm not going to make excuses because it's not something that's important to me.
I think that a lot of new business owners think that they need to say yes to everything. And, you know, they just run at the wall being like, okay, I'm just going to say yes to everything that comes up because I don't know until I try and I have to just cut my teeth on it. And it's like, yeah, but you don't if you know what you want and your goal.
Yes.
Then no's become a lot easier.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think saying yes is not always a bad thing, right?
No.
Sometimes you do need to say yes to a lot, even in the beginning, but you'll get to a place where it's like, I've seen this one before. It's not a fit. I know it's not a fit.
Absolutely.
You don't need to say yes that time.
Yes. And again, you bring up such a good point. I always say that like saying no is, you have to value your no's, right? And you only get to a place where you value your no's when you have said yes to a lot of things.
to things you wish you didn't.
Absolutely. But like, again, that's the point of life, is the more times you can say yes, the more times you can gain clarity to when you want to say no in the future.
Yep.
But if you don't say yes, you don't take that leap, you don't put yourself in uncomfortable positions, you don't gain clarity on what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I have so many, I shouldn't say so many, but I have people that are like, how do I start a business? I don't know what I want to do. And I'm like, what have you done? They're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, who do you work for? Oh, I work for the same company I've been working for 15 years. Do you like what you do? No. Why haven't you changed? I don't know what to do. Well, what have you tried? Nothing. Okay. So if you don't try new things,
right,
you don't learn what you do and don't like.
Yeah.
I always say like buying a new home, and I'm learning this as I just bought another home and I'm doing things that I didn't do on the previous home. Like home ownership or even just renting a home can be the easiest place for people to put themselves in positions to start to learn new skills.
Yeah.
And when you learn new skills, you identify what you want to potentially turn into a business, what you want to outsource, delegate, or pay someone else to come do in the future. Again, it's something that you just continue to gain and hone in on the clarity that you want in life, so that you can say yes and no and be happy with the decisions you're making. I
love it. When does a young boss, maybe someone who's listening, need to call someone like you to say help?
I mean, we have a pretty particular process that I think everyone, and I always try to give as many people as possible the opportunity to go through it. My team and I have designed something called a financial roadmap.
Okay.
So it's a tangible worksheet that allows us to really start to hone in and identify what's important to our clients or prospects.
Yep.
How do we uncover what they value and help them uncover that and explore that? How do we set clear goals and timeframes on when they'd want to achieve those and what they would feel like should they actually achieve it?
Right.
Because again, the emotional part of achieving a goal is important.
Yeah.
It's good to reflect on why you originally set out to achieve that goal and how would you feel if you achieved that goal.
Yeah.
And then lastly, through that process, we kind of outline where they are now financially compared to where they'd like to be.
Okay.
And I would say that's something, no matter what stage of life you're in, whether you're a business owner or not, I try to do my best to set up as many of those as possible. It's completely complimentary for people, whether they end up working with us or not, or a good fit with where they're at. I still think it's dramatically impactful for everyone to go through and really experience that. So now's the time.
Now is always the time.
So yeah.
I love it. I recently saw on your Instagram, right, that you have been purchasing more homes. You're going crazy with the businesses. You also told me you have a 1-year-old at home.
Yes.
Okay. Your wife's also a young boss. You've got a lot going on, and that she wants you to maybe slow down a little. But what does the upcoming years look like for you? What's on the agenda next? What are you looking forward to? And maybe is it slowing down a little?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is slowing down for me. And slowing down again, doesn't necessarily have to be, and I think I made that a point to kind of vocalize that in my post, is like, it doesn't mean that I'm going to stop pursuing things at the rate in which I am now.
Yeah.
It just means that, again, I've recognized that it's time to put my signal on and change lanes. I've really made it a priority to hit certain tangible accomplishments and financial goals over these last 3 to 5 years that have required a lot of sacrifice from me and my family.
Yeah.
And I think you get to a point in time where you have to determine, like, do I want to continue to make those sacrifices? Or again, do I switch lanes and start reaping the benefit or enjoying the fruits of my labor, so to speak, with what I've accomplished now?
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it's continuing to hone in on the clarity, maybe not jumping so far outside the box and setting such clear goals. Like, my goal for myself is to not set as clear of goals.
Okay.
Which I guess is the opposite of any advice that I would give most people. But for me, again, it's very easy. And I think it's what makes me good at my job, is it's very easy for me to set my sights on something and bring it to reality once I've put in my head that it's something I want to achieve.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's almost saying, like, let's not set a goal for yourself. Like, yes, let's continue to save and invest in these areas, but let's not put so much pressure on making sure that that's done in this squeezed time frame.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's kind of something I have to say, like, don't take life so seriously, because it's very easy for me to put so much pressure on myself to achieve these things and say that they're really important. I want to take them really serious. But the reality is, it's like, no one cares. And that is a big thing. No one cares what you're doing.
Yeah.
So do it for yourself.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of, I guess maybe you could say I'm kind of in that transition point where I'm starting to hone in and gain clarity on, like, my life is about me and my family. It's not about me doing anything for really to prove anything to anyone else.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's where maybe that's where some of that post had come from, and just kind of deciding that moving forward, I want to be more intentional and making sure that I have the presence that I feel like I deserve to be where I'm at now and not somewhere in the future.
I love that. I love that, living in the moment a little bit more. And I recently heard something, I was probably on Instagram, and it was just saying, like, hey, it's maybe doesn't apply to us 100% because we own our own things, but it was like, if you died tomorrow, your coworkers and your boss isn't going to be like, man, they put in a lot of OT.
Nope.
Like, but your kids are going to be like,
Yes.
they spent time with me or they didn't, right?
And that's something my wife has to remind me of all the time, honestly.
Like, they're not going to give a shit.
Yeah.
But your kids, your family, they will.
Yeah, I mean, I think something I try to do often, and maybe this is weird, but I try to, sometimes I visualize myself as I'm going to another meeting of kind of what I would want, like, my funeral to look like. Like, what I would want people to be there talking and saying about me.
Yes, that's good. I
Yeah.
think that's good. It's a little morbid, but it's good. I think like that.
Yeah. It's interesting, and it really takes me deep into thought of, like, what actions am I taking today to have that kind of impact on people's life? Because I do want to have an impact on people's lives.
Yes.
So yeah, it's an interesting perspective, but again, it's something that's constantly a work in progress, and I feel like it's now my time to kind of say, like, okay, let's pump the brakes. Let's focus on family and growing that, and everything doesn't have to be on a clear deadline if it's completed by then or you've failed, and
Yeah. You know, they say you only have to make two people proud, 8-year-old you and 80-year-old you, right? And so that's the
like
funeral
that.
version of you, the 80-year-old version.
Yeah.
Like, are they going to look back and be like, you spent your time wisely. You did what you were supposed to do.
Right.
You impacted people. You did all this good stuff. So
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing too, last thing, is, like, my wife and I have started talking about, having more kids, and obviously
Yes.
you're pregnant, going to be having your first here soon too, which is extremely exciting. It's like, you never hear people say, when asked what their biggest regret is, you never hear them say, like, oh, I had too many kids.
Never.
And I didn't even know I'd be saying this. The other day, I asked my wife, I said, what if we had, because we want to have 4 kids. I said, what if we have more than 4 kids? And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I just say? But the reality is, like, once you have a child, and again, I think once you start to create some of those foundational pieces to understand what's important to you in life, it's like the sky becomes the limit, and it's like, why not?
Yeah.
No one ever said, oh, I had too many kids.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of comes back to your point of, like, enjoying the now, and creating that family that I can be proud of once I'm no longer here.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thanks so much for being here and sharing all of your amazing insight. And if anybody wants more information on Zack's CFP company, definitely we will have the links below. So check it out and check him out. And if you are a young boss who needs help with guidance for, asset protection and planning in that regard, definitely reach out to them because they will be able to guide and help you through those processes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Young Boss Podcast with your host, Isabel Garino. Be sure to like, share, and follow on Instagram and TikTok and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And let us know, are you making 8-year-old you and 80-year-old you proud? Remember, youth is your power.